Okay, so we have Pierre Sabak with us today. He is an expert in ancient symbolism and etymology and is widely recognized as a leading academic in the fields of religion, mythology, mysticism, and the esoteric. Pierre's work in new ufology, the study of occult symbolism and scatology, details a secret alien code written within language. Pierre, thank you for coming on. How are you?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's excellent to speak to you, Robert.
So how did you get interested in this subject, and if you could explain your process a little bit?
Well, that goes all the way back to my childhood. When I was a child, I saw a rocket in a field, basically, and it took off vertically, and it went on a right angle, and it flew over my head. And I basically went indoors, and I said to my grandma, "I've just seen a rocket in the field," and she said, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And from there on, I had a real profound interest within UFOs. And so that's something that I've been reading about ever since. But I think what's quite interesting is if you like, the combination of the religious tradition with ufology, and particularly when you deconstruct occult symbolism, there is a comparison between the scatological tradition, which is the representation of angelic ships, boats, vessels, within the religious and the mythological tradition, and this correlation between angelic sailors. And I think that this is something which is important because this is something which is classified. So that's just a basic summary of where my interest developed.
And then could you, for the people that don't know, could you explain your process a little bit, like how you came up with this amazing information?
Yeah, sure. I started first of all with my book, The Murder of Reality, A Hidden Symbolism of the Dragon. And this was really interested in the occult worship of the serpent. And again, there is this correspondence between ocular, which is the eye, and occult of that which is hidden. And again, that which is hidden refers in the Arabic to the jinn or jana, which is to hide or to conceal. Now, the jinn is another word for jinn, a serpent or a worm, which in the angelological tradition refers to the seraphim. Again, the seraphim are also known as a watcher, so there's this correspondence between Sopheth, a watcher, and seraph, which is a non-human angel. So the occult tradition is something which is hidden, and it refers to the watchers. In the Greek, drakain is to watch or to shine. So this is another word for the seraphim, or Sopheth, a watcher, seraph, and Surepha, which is fire. So these are non-human angels, and they really do appertain to the scatological tradition and these angelic carriers, which are related to the religious and the mythological tradition. So you're seeing, if you like, these correspondences both within religion and also within mythology.
And can you talk about the seraphim and the cherubim, then how they control they're the two races that control the planet?
I think this is something which is pretty amazing. Going back to The Murder of Reality, which was my first book, I really got interested, and The Murder of Reality was really a study on the Serpentagena, which literally in the Latin means the serpent race. They're also known as the Anguagena, which is another word for the serpent race, which is a Latin term. Now, the serpent race refers to, as I said, the seraphim or the jinn. They are also known as the watchers. So there is, if you like, this correspondence between the veneration of the deities of Theos, a god in the Greek, and Theoros, which is a watcher, which is equated with Phos, which is light. Now, this is a special type of symbology, which is known as polyglottal symbolism. This is a wordplay which repeats. So, for example, Theos, a watcher, Theos, a god, and Phos, which is light, is found in the Aramaic. Erin, a watcher, and you've got, which is polymorphic. It's a polymorphic symbol of a shining one. So the watchers are the shining ones, is an esoteric signifier of the seraphim. Sopheth, a watcher, seraph, which is a serpent, Surepha, which is fire. Now, within the occult tradition, what's very interesting is that the angels are typically represented as the angelic host. Now, the terminology host means a foreign or invading army. And the host in the Hebrew is translated as Sabaoth. So the angelic host is Sabaoth. Again, in the biblical traditions, Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of the host. Now, in Hebrew, Sabaoth is related to Saba, which is an army, Setheth, which is a serpent, and Sevet, which is a crew member of a vessel. So this is a naval host, which is identified with Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of the host. Now, Sevet, a crew member, is related to Teva, which is an ark or a vessel. So basically the angelic host, if you want to bring it back to ufology or to scaphology, is this naval host. And this goes into the classical tradition. The classical tradition relates to the naval tradition. Classis, meaning a naval fleet, is a classical tradition which is classified. And this is dependent upon one's class. And this goes into the symbolism of bloodlines or royal bloodlines which are deemed to be special or venerated. I think we can come back to that point a little bit later on, but to address your question about the seraphim and the cherubim, when we go into the occult tradition, which is this hidden or concealed tradition which appertains to the jinn, they're also known in the biblical tradition as the Ruach Elohim, the high spirits, we see that basically that with the angelic host, as in ufology, the angels would appear, and there would be two types of angels. There would be the seraphim, which were the non-human angels, and again, typically the jinn were also represented as non-human angels or serpents. And then you would have human angels, which were related to cherub, which is this proto-human angel. So the angelic host appears, and often they appear together within the symbology. So, for example, when you see the symbology of the Ophanim wheels, now the Ophanim wheels was the ancient word for a flying saucer. The wheels typically are represented with eyes around the edge of the wheels, which represents, as I said, Sopheth, a watcher, and Seraph, which is a serpent. So again, the Ophanim wheels is really denominational of the seraphic host. But the watchers appear together, so often they will appear with human and non-human signifiers. So, for example, when you look at the symbology of the Ophanim wheel is often combined with the throne. Now, the symbology here is twofold. Number one, it represents that the angelic lineage is related to royalty, and this is found in the correspondence between Malak, an angel, Malak, a sailor, Melech, a king. In English, we would say kingship. One who is born of a boat is angelic. This goes back to the naval tradition, which is the classical tradition. And it goes back into symbology of the ship of state, gubernatio, to steer a vessel, where we would get the word government. So the angels themselves, there are two types of angels. They typically appear together within the symbolism. So, for example, the throne chariot may represent, you may have a throne, a sculpture of a throne, and on the throne there is a wheel. And combined with the wheel is the serpent, which denotes the seraphic host, and the Ophanim wheels, which in the modern parlance would be a flying saucer. But again, you would have an angel, and typically the angel would be carrying a type of sword. So in the Hebrew, there's a correspondence between keruv, which is a sword, and cherub, which is a cherub or a human angel. And so this is important. It's used as a signifier to denote a human angel. But when you see the combination of the wheel, the serpent with the wheel, and then the angel with a sword, then you know that this is actually nominal of the seraphic and human host and their appearance, which appear together. This is found within ufology, modern ufology, in which angels, like with MILABs and military abductions, you'll typically find that the military are working with the angels, but this is ancient. It goes back to the ancient symbolism and classical symbolism, which is classified, classis, a naval fleet, Malak, an angel, Malak, a sailor. So,
and just to clarify, these races aren't from this, they're not from a heavenly realm. They're from off planet, correct? I mean, I know that, but just that.
Okay, yeah, this is a very complicated question. They are equated with different star systems. And so, for example, you'll have the Nephilim, Nephil, which is a giant, which relates to Nephilia, which is Orion. Now, the Nephilim are a stitched or grafted bloodline. This is the terminology that the ancient Semites used to describe this conjoined bloodline between the Erin, which are the watchers or the shining ones. Now the Erin, the watchers or the shining ones, had intercourse with the daughters of Adam. Now we know that the Erin are correspondent with the seraphim because the Erin in the Testament of Amram are described as looking like vipers. So the combination of the daughters of Adam and the vipers, which can be understood as the seraphim, gave birth to this unsanctioned lineage known as the Nephilim, which are affiliated to Nephilia Orion. But there is this wordplay between Nephil, a giant, the singular noun, and Nephil, which means fallen in the Hebrew. So they're deemed to be a fallen lineage which was unsanctified. Now, the Erin, the watchers or the shining ones, is just basically a metonym or another word for the Elohim, which literally translates as the gods or the high ones. We would certainly find the correspondence with the Seraph and Raphi, which is the Arabic word or the Semitic word denoting that which is high. So again, there is this correspondence between the seraphim and the Elohim and Erin, which are the watchers or the shining ones, which is a wordplay on Awim, which is a serpent. And again, it's very interesting because when you look at the symbolism of the serpent is typically described as being spiritual-like in its manifestation. So if you like, there is a correlation between the Elohim, the high ones, which are the gods, the Erin, which are the watchers or the shining ones, Awim, which is a serpent, Awa, which is a jinn, and Hawa, which is the air or the atmosphere, because again, they come from the air or the atmosphere, and the jinn is typically described as a spirit. But we know that the Awim, which are the serpents or the destroyers, are a type of Awa, which is a jinn. And as we said, even the Arabic academics would translate the word seraphim, the Hebrew word seraphim, as a jinn. And again, the Old Semitic noun, jen, a serpent or a worm, denotes that the jinn are a type of seraphim. But it's a type of seraphim which mutineered. So that they are considered to be a part of the host which mutineered, and they are described as fallen angels.
It's amazing. I'm fascinated by this. Now, can you talk about the creation of the Adamic race and the difference between a tweaked bloodline and a grafted bloodline?
Right, yeah. I'll do that, but I think it's important for me to elaborate a little bit more on the symbology of the angelic sailor, so that we're very clear in our minds that the sailor is actually equated to these angelic carriers, which are understood to be the opening wheels. So I just want to give your viewers a few etymologies to establish this point. So for example, as I said before, there is a correlation between Malak an angel, Malak a sailor. It's a polymorphic symbol. Now this relates to Mekal, which is a vessel or a container, but a vessel or a container is used to denote a ship. Now we find the same symbology with the cherubim. So in the singular, cherub, which is a proto-human angel, is related to carib, which is a small carrier ship, a type of ship which would be used to go on the land like a rowing boat, so a very small type of boat. But again, you've also got the correspondence with the seraphim and Safina, which is a ship. And those who are born of a boat, the Ben Sira, those who are born of a boat, is another word for Malak an angel or Malak a sailor. Now, in the Kabbalistic traditions, the Ben Sira is utilizing a special type of wordplay which is known as diptych paranomasia. Diptych paranomasia is a wordplay from one language into another. So the wording Sira, which is a boat, the Ben Sira, a son of a boat, in Arabic, Sira denotes Sirius. So the Ben Sira, the son of a boat, are the Ben Sira, which are the sons of Sirius. And the sons of Sirius feed into the question which you just asked me about planting of the Adamic human on the earth. So, for example, within the Quranic tradition, this is referred to as the second creation. And the second creation is, we're at the stage of the second creation. This is the second creation, if you like, is undergoing. It's through a process of the second creation. And the angels which are identified with Sirius, now again, the etymology of Sirius denotes the sparkling one, from the Arabic root Sarah, which is a spark. Again, in the Greek, Sirios means the scorching one or the sparkling one. So Sarah, which is a spark, which relates to Sira, which is Sirius, is this esoteric signifier of the seraphim. In the singular form, Seraph, a serpent, is related to Serapha, which is fire. So fire is used as an astrotheological marker of Sirius. And this is why the jinn, or in the Old Semitic jinn, a serpent or worm, is said to be born of fire, because it's denoting esoterically the sons of Sirius, or the Ben Sira, son of a boat. And there is this, if you like, this identification between Sirius, Sira, a boat, and the Old Semitic Aramaic word Zah, which is an angel. Now, what's very interesting about Zah, which is an angel, is that it's polymorphic. So the word Zah, an angel, in the Aramaic also means an alien. So they're one and the same thing. And this is picked up in the modern Hebrew word Khazar, which is a spaceman or an alien. Now, Khazar is very, very interesting because Khayar, an animal, in the Aramaic, K, which is used to denote a living creature, turns up in the Aramaic word Elake, a living God. But the word Elake, a living God, is polymorphic. It has this additional meaning of a Elake, which is this high creature. In modern parlance, we would describe this as an extraterrestrial biological entity, which goes back to Zah, an angel or an alien. correlated with Sira, which is a boat. Now, trying to get our heads around this, again, similar word plays are found within the Latin. So this, again, is polyglottal symbolism. So you would find a relationship in the Latin between alienus, that which is strange or alien, and alnus, which is a boat or a ship. And again, there are these correspondences between angelus, an angel, and ongui, which is a serpent or a snake, which would relate to the seraphim. In the Babylonian language, Akan, a seraph, is related to the Greek word archon. And again, the archons are often represented as a dragon, in the Greek drakon. So there's a wordplay between drakon and archon, but the root of archon, which is an angel or a ruler, which goes back to the Greek noun akim, which is a king or a sovereign, is going all the way back to the Babylonian word akan, which is a seraph, and again is related to the root word ak, which is to shine, where we'd pick this up in the Hebrew word malak, which is an angel or a messenger. So yeah, a little bit of a long answer, but if you just want to repeat your question about the Adamic man, perhaps we could
talk about the creation of the Adamic man, and then the difference between a tweaked bloodline and then a grafted bloodline. I know what it is. The tweaked bloodline was us, the Adamic man,
correct,
and the grafted bloodline was the Nephilim. But I wanted people to understand, so they get an idea of your books and stuff like that.
That's brilliant, because usually a lot of people don't understand that, but that was a very good summary. So yes, essentially the Adamic human was created, and this goes back into occult symbolism. Again, it's astrotheological, and it's based upon my study of etymology. So the way that I work is that I read through dictionaries and I look at correspondence and word patterns. So my facility is not so much for speaking languages, because I don't really have a facility for speaking languages in that way. I have a facility for pattern recognition. And so I read through dictionaries and I find these correspondences. And what I quickly began to realize is that there are correspondences within symbols and language which can be described as polyglottal symbolism, these word plays which repeat. And so these word plays can really be understood to be parallel thought formations, and this is what we're finding. So when you go back into the classical and the mythological tradition, you see that the Adamic human was created. Now, the Adamic human was created because the cherubim, which are these proto-humans, they're not sexually viable with the seraphim, but the Adamic human was created to be sexually viable both with the cherubim and with the seraphim. Now, in the ancient mythology, this goes back to the Titanomachy, which is the war in heaven, the war of the Titans, when the demigods rebelled. So this goes all the way back. But the bloodline of the demigods are related to the Watchers, the Erin, the Watchers, or the Shining Ones, which are described as looking like vipers, Awin, which is a serpent or a viper. Now, the Adamic human is tweaked. In the occult symbolism, the Adamic man was created on the foot of Orion, and the Adamic man then went from Orion to Mars, and so there's this etymological relationship between Adam, which is red, Hadam, which is to annihilate in the Arabic, and Mahadim, which is Mars. So Mars was destroyed, and the Adamic human, if we pick this up in the Zoroastrian tradition, was taken to the receptacle of the moon and then was then planted on the earth. And so the mythology is actually quite complicated. It is something which I'm studying, and I'm currently writing a book about it. But first of all, I want to release my book about fairies. And again, what's very interesting about fairies is that they also go back to the scatological tradition. And so what you're finding within the symbology of fairies, for example, is that the priesthood, they inserted their symbols and this codified discourse. I refer to this as a private discourse within the symbolism of fairies. And it is really encoding the angelological tradition. So this is something which I'm studying at the moment. So anyway, the Adamic man is equated with Mars and is equated with the foot of Orion, where the Nephilim are identified with Yad al-Jazza, which is the hand of Orion. Now, the hand of Orion is the hidden hand, and this is the occult tradition, as what Sir Isaac Newton said, I have stood on the shoulders of giants. Again, he went to the College of Eton, which is the Anglo-Saxon word for a giant. So this, if you like, Newton's papers on science is going back to this angelic tradition. And again, the etymology of science, scientia, is coming from the Arabic root shatir, which is clever, which is relating to shaitan. Okay, so again, this is why in English, when you say a scientist, it's very reminiscent of the word Satanist, because the tradition is going back to the fallen angels who were described as watchers, who were described as the giants. And this bloodline is identified with the royal bloodline. So there's a correspondence between the Phoenician word and the Greek word anax, which is a prince, and the Hebrew word, which is a diptych paranomasia, of anak, which is a giant. So the giants are related to this princely bloodline. As I said before, in the Aramaic, there would be this correspondence between Sar, a prince, Sira, a boat, Zar, an angel or alien. In English, we would say kingship. Again, in the Hebrew and the Arabic, Malak, an angel, Melek, a king, Malak, a sailor, kingship.
That's amazing.
So, and I think that this is a very important discipline, because it's a big chunk of mythology and religious symbolism which has never been talked about. It's never been discussed. And in order to understand the classical tradition, class is the naval fleet, Malak an angel, Malak a sailor, you have to understand the traditions of the angelic sailors. And this is a classified tradition. It is being redacted. It is hidden from view. It's this occult tradition based upon the watchers and the dragons, which are these non-human angels. And it's a tradition which has informed our religion. It's informed our language. And again, it's part of what I describe as the artifact. Now, the artifact in itself is a very interesting idea, because the artifact is this code found within language. And I argue that this code is almost like a DNA code, because it's the signature of the watchers. It's the signature of those beings who put us on this planet, and they confounded human language. But they put this signature through polyglottal symbolism or parallel thought formations. Academics such as Chomsky would describe this as a universal grammar, but polyglottal symbolism proves the existence of universal grammar. Chomsky may have spoken about universal grammar, but there was little evidence within scholarship for the existence of universal grammar. I've proven the existence of universal grammar through polyglottal symbolism or parallel thought formations. And this is important, because this signature of the angels are used to control how we think. And so this is a very important idea. Again, it goes into very arcane traditions of telepathy as well. So the artifact also interlinks with how the watchers themselves control us through language, but also communicate through language as well. And so, for example, within the Arabic tradition, there is a subset of watchers which are known as the Karin, which is a type of jinn, again coming from the etymology of kayin, which is an entity. Now, the Karin is typically translated by Arabic scholars as a companion spirit or a jinn. I prefer the word familiar, because this is a type of familiar. And the Karin are related both to Kayin, which is an entity, Ayin, which is an eye, and Erin, which are the watchers, which go all the way back to the Elohim, which are the high ones. So again, it's a subset of the Elohim, or the high ones. So, yeah, we're dealing with a species which are telepathic. They're very interested in emergent systems. They're interested in the evolutionary cycles, and they control humanity through language. And so in order to understand how we have been controlled, it's therefore important to deconstruct the artifact. It's important to understand what the artifact is and how the artifact controls how we think, because there is this correspondence between both pictorial symbology and also and imagery and language. And so language controls images which are subliminal, and therefore language also controls behavior. So if you want to control behavior, you have to control language. Now, this is the study of semiotics. I refer to this as Illuminautics, the study of the signs of the Illuminati. Okay, so understanding the signs, semiotics, understanding and deconstructing signs is integral. And Illuminautics is this private discourse by the Disciperati, those who control the discourse, who are the deceivers. The word Disciperati is related to the word disciple, because the disciple is actively deceived through symbolism, through subliminal symbolism, which is found within the artifact.
Can you talk about how the seraphim symbolism is within the Abrahamic religions?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a complicated subject, that is. But basically, the seraphim, so for example, Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of the host, the etymology of Sabaoth is related to, so Saba, which is an army, is related to Sephath, which is a serpent, which relates to the seraphic host. But there are also clues to the fact that Yahweh himself is depicted as a serpent, and this is found within occult language. So, for example, Yahweh is transliterated according to the commentaries of Bullinger, who wrote the commentaries for the King James Bible, as Aya. Now, Aya, in the Bible, Yahweh refers to himself as I am that I am. Aya Asher Aya. Now, Aya is related to the Aramaic root Aya, which is the verbal root I am. But Aya is a cryptic wordplay on Aya, which is a serpent. And this is because Yahweh is represented as an entitas, again, coming from the verbal root I am. So he's a type of entity. So there is, if you like, this correspondence between, in the Aramaic, Aya, which is the name of Yahweh, Aya, which is I am, which is denoting an entity. But again, Aya is a wordplay on Aya, which is a serpent, and Ayal, which is a goblin. And this is why Yahweh Sabaoth, Saba the host, Sephath a serpent, or the seraphic host, is also described in the biblical tradition as El Shaddai. Shaddai is coming from the Hebrew root shed, ghost, ghoul, or goblin. So again, we're seeing that there is this correspondence between Aya, which is Yahweh's name, Aya a serpent, Ayal a goblin, and El Shaddai, shed, a goblin, ghost, ghoul. So the relationships are self-evident. They're codified within this private discourse. And so when Yahweh reveals his name, he reveals himself in a burning bush. And the burning bush is related to Senna, which is a type of bush, which goes back into the traditions of Sukkoth, which is a tabernacle. Now, it's very interesting because in the traditions of Sinai, the word Sinai is related to the Arabic word sin, which is a tooth, and again goes back to Shen in the Hebrew, which is a cog or a tooth. So Sinai is going back to this idea of a cog or a tooth. Now, a cog or a tooth is very important because this actually goes back into the symbology of the opening wheels, because the opening wheels are described in the book of Ezekiel as the interlinking wheels, which are these gear shafts, because the opening wheels are said to have been put together as a series of interlocking wheels. In today's parlance, we would describe this as a flying saucer. So the symbol of the cog goes back into the symbol of the tabernacle where the Ark of the Covenant is kept. Now remember that the word ark is polymorphic because the word ark also denotes a boat. And again, in the Greek, there is this correspondence between an ark on an angel, an ark, which is a large boat or a vessel, which in the Greek would be olkas, which is a large carrier vessel. So the Ark of the Covenant is used to signify a boat, which is represented as a circular wheel. We would say an arc or a curve. And so the etymologies are going back to this idea of a circular boat or a vessel. Yeah, this boat or a vessel, which is a circular wheel. So, and again, within the Greek etymology of a temple sanctuary, you've got nous, which is a temple sanctuary, which is equated with nos, which is a boat. And so in the ecclesiastical symbology also, you've got the nave of a church, which relates to navis, a boat. We would say that we worship. Worshipping is venerating these angelic vessels. It's a polyglottal symbol because the word worship is really a translation from Saba, which is to glorify. Again, from the Aramaic and Hebrew word Sabaoth, which is the angelic host, which is related to Teva, which is an ark or a vessel. Teva also being used to denote both the receptacle which Moses is carried in and also Noah's Ark. So Noah's Ark is equated specifically with the Ark of the angels, the archons. But yeah, the symbolism of the church goes back into the symbolism of the boat and the ship and the worship and the veneration of these angelic boats and vessels. Now, these boats and vessels were typically buried underneath temple precincts, and this is why there is this mirror imagery between the temple being represented as a boat and the idea that the boat itself is actually buried within underneath the temple. And so you're finding references to this and codified references within classical literature. So, for example, the Sali priesthood hid a shield which fell from heaven, the ansil, which was a type of shield, and they made replicas of this shield so that the shield could not be found. And it was described that whoever would possess this shield would be the most dominant race on the planet. And this is because these shields were considered to be a type of weapon. Now, in the symbology, the shields are represented as a type of missile. And this is why there is this, if you like, a correspondence between the Latin word missilis, which is a missile, which originally was understood to be a type of flying shield, which was catapulted from a catapult, like a giant frisbee, and emissary, which is a type of angel. So these emissaries or angels come from these shields. And this is why there is this relationship in the Greek between theos, a god, thurios, which is a shield, which was equated with these angelic boats and vessels. And again, you're seeing this relationship with the jinn as well, because within the Greek statues of the goddess, typically the goddess would be shown with a shield, and behind the shield there would be a serpent, and that would be working on the Aramaic wordplay on Junna, which is a shield, which literally is that which protects, Janna, which is to hide or to conceal, because a shield hides, Jinn, which is a supernatural being, and Jen, which is a serpent or a worm. So again, this is going back to the symbology of the opening wheel and the serpent, which is denominational of the seraphic host. And these are considered to be non-human angels. As we said, theos, God, thurios, which is a shield. But again, the same word plays are found with the apue, which is the arpi, but the apue literally means the abductors. Now, the apue are sometimes shown within the symbolism as wearing a shield. And this is because it works on the wordplay. Opulon, a shield, opuli, a soldier, in this context, a military host, which are identified with an angelic host, Erpeton, a reptile, and we see that there's a relationship between opulon, a shield, pleon, a boat. So again, the circular shields, which were a type of missiles, which were typically filled with hot sand and thrown at the enemy, are considered to be a type of a military weapon, which were identified with the military host or this naval host, which are correlated with opulon, a shield, pleon, which is a boat. And it's very interesting because when you actually begin to look at Roman symbolism, they would show their senior members within their governments, such as the proconsul, they would have them with a shield, and you'd have a statue of the person's bust or head coming from the shield. And so within heraldry, the symbol of the shield denotes those, the Ben Sira, those who are born of a boat. The shield is used to identify, opulon, a shield, is correlated with pleon, a boat, and they're correlated with a deity, hence theos, a god, thurios, which is a shield, or within the Aramaic traditions, Junna, a shield, and the jinn.
Okay, can you talk about the builders or the angels and their relationship to the Western priesthood?
Oh, right, okay. Yeah,
yeah,
it's fine. Okay, now this is how the priesthood work. When they tend to use symbology, they give you a little bit of the truth, and they mix it with untruths or confuse the information. So, for example, the Hebrew word malach, an angel, typically by rabbinical scholars is traced back to the root amar, amar, which is to speak or to command. Now, amar is found within the Arabic word amar bana, which is to build. And so the angels within occult symbology are equated with the builders. So amar, which is to speak or to command, again, this idea would be, if you like, in English, we'd say this could be represented as a construct, an intellectual construct, are related to Amar Bane, which is a builder, again. And the builders then go back into the Masonic traditions. Now, what's interesting about Amar is that Amara is a fleet and relates to Emir, which is a prince. In English, we would say lordship, princeship, kingship. These are all signifiers of this angelic lineage, which goes back into the Masonic traditions of the builders. And as I said before, within the classical tradition and the Masonic tradition, there are really two orders which are represented, and this is really the parallel society. And so you have the two pillars of Freemasonry, which represents the cherubim, which is this humanist tradition or knowledge which was given to humanity from these proto-human angels. And then you have the second pillar, which is the seraphim, and the seraphim are these non-human angels. In the classical tradition, this really corresponds to the Pythagorean Euclidean tradition. So in Greek, Pythagoras, Pythonagoras, is the speaker of the serpent. This can be understood to be the seraphim, non-human angels. But Euclides, meaning good glory, is a diptych paranamesa, because his word is really going back into the Arabic. Now, Euclid is famous for writing his treatise on geometry, the elements of geometry. Now, his name, Euclid comes from the Arabic root Euclid, to ape or to copy, from Kurd and ape. So again, Euclid is denoting the humanist tradition, which can be identified with the ape. So this is something which is found within occult symbolism. Now, if you want to go into real obtuse symbolism and obscure symbolism, then there is a third pillar which isn't represented, and this is a hidden pillar which would denote the occult tradition. And this really denotes the third bloodline, which is a grafted bloodline and feeds into the traditions of the neophytes. Now, this really goes into the three orders of the Illuminati, which are the tripartite Illuminati. The tripartite Illuminati are these three orders of the Illuminati, and they represent themselves as follows. So you've got, in the Hebrew, Ishman is a wordplay on Esh, which is fire. You've got Seraph, which is a wordplay on Serapha, which is fire. And then you've got the Greek word neophytos. Phuton, a plant, is related to phot, which is light. And so these are the three orders of the Illuminati. And the neophytes are this element which are grafted. And again, this links into the symbology of the family tree, this idea that a grafted bloodline goes back to a tree. And again, within symbolism, it's often picked up with the iconography of the rose as well, because the rose, and again, ivy as well, it's a parasitic species, it grafts itself to the tree. So these are all emblems used to denote a family tree which is equated with the serpent. Again, the serpent is found within the tree, and this equates to a grafted bloodline. Now, a grafted bloodline can also be represented as a stitched bloodline, which are the reframe. Now, the reframe translates as a ghost, but again, the ghost is another word for the Ruach Elohim, which are the seraphim. And again, the high spirits. The high spirits are the Elohim, which goes back to Erin, which is a serpent or a watcher, Awim, which are the serpents or the destroyers. So they're one and the same thing. So the reframe are rendered as the ghosts, and it's coming from the root Rapha, which is to stitch. But the reframe, again, it's polymorphic. It can also denote Rapha, which is a giant, and this goes back into the traditions of the stitched bloodline, which goes back into the various factions of the Nephilim. There are different names for the Nephilim. You've got the Nephilim, you've got the Emim, you've got the Titans, you've got the I'm trying to think, the Gibberim, again, Gibbar, Orion in the Semitic languages. So they're all equated with Orion, which is Yad al-Jazza, the hidden hand. Yad al-Jazza is the hand of Orion. Again, the symbology of the hand is very, very important. This is why when the Jews read the Pentateuch, which are the Jewish scriptures, they use a hand to point at the scriptures. And again, this would be very specific of Yad al-Jazza, which is denoting Orion. Now, Orion is very important within astrotheology because it's used to denote the covenant of worlds. So if you like, within the symbolism, the Ben Sira, the sons of Abok, go back to the Illuminati, the Shining Ones, the Watchers, but the proto-humans are equated with the Pleiades. The two groups warred with each other, and as did the Nephilim, but they meet in the middle with the Covenant of Worlds. And the Covenant of Worlds is therefore very important when we're dealing with symbolism, because it's very closely aligned in the Masonic traditions with Orion, and it's aligned to the builders, this angelic lineage. So, and again, I think it's useful here also going back to the symbols of the Ben Sira, the sons of the boat, Sira denoting Sirius, so the sons of Sirius, which are another word really for the Illuminati. Now, the Illuminati themselves are very interesting because the wording itself comes from the Aramaic root Axori, a brother of light. Now, what's very interesting is that Axori is a cryptic signifier of the Axari, the Aramaic word, a brother of an angel. Remember that the stem Za, an angel, is polymorphic of an alien, which goes back to the Khazar, which is a spaceman or a space alien, and the Elake, which is a high creature, which were otherwise known as high gods or living gods. So that's, if you like, the symbolism of the Illuminati, the three orders of the Illuminati, and that how they interplay astrotheologically with the different star systems, and how this symbolism is mirrored on the earth in terms of the navis, which is the boat, which would be the nave of a church, how we venerate or worship these vessels. And I think that this is very interesting when we look at the symbolism of the priestess as well, because the priestess would typically have a votive dish, and the votive dish would be basically a circle, and you would have a dot in the middle, which would signify an axle of a wheel, which is the opening wheels. As we said before, they were worshipping these vessels. In English we say worship. They would say Sabbath, to praise, to glorify, Sabaoth, which is the host. So you've got the wheel. It is doubled also with a shield. Now, so it's a visio paranamasia, or it's a visual pun on a shield with a boss. A boss is a spike. Okay? So they were venerating these angelic vessels, which were concealed and which were typically represented as a wheel. So, and this goes back into the arcane traditions of animal mutilation. And again, the priesthood were copying. So in terms of animal mutilation, where the animal is exsanguinated, the priesthood were copying what they were finding within the natural world of the animals being exsanguinated from this alien source. So they themselves ritualistically would exsanguinate the animal. And so this, and again, this is because it is said that the dragon drinks blood. And again, there's a relationship in English between drink and drake, and you find in the same word plays with within the Semitic languages as well, Seraph and Sarat. I'm trying to remember, but anyway, there is a correspondence also within the Semitic as well between drinking blood, which are equated with the traditions of the Gul, Gula, which is a female jinn, Gala, which is to seize, and again, related to the Aramaic and Hebrew word Galgal, which is a wheel. So the wheels are related to Gula, which is a female jinn, or a Gul in the Arabic for a male jinn, Gala, which is to seize. And we're finding similar wordplays, if you like, within the Greek as well, with the Lamia. The Lamia is a diptych paranamasia. It's coming from the Aramaic root, Lami, which is to shine. As we said, the shining ones are the watchers or the seraphim, Sophefa watcher, Serepha, which is fire. And Lami is related to Lambano, which is to take or to seize. So the symbology, again, as we said earlier with the Greek etymologies of apue and abductor, related to oplon, which is a shield, which is pleon, a boat. So these wordplays are universal, and so therefore this idea that human abduction is a new concept which came about as a result of ufology is just simply not true. Once you begin to look at the scatological tradition, I describe this as new ufology, which is the study of occult symbolism within ufology. You realize that the taking and stealing of humans is very ancient. Within the Roman mysteries, this would be referred to as nympholyptus, which is to be stolen or to be taken by the nymphs. The word nymph is coming from the Arabic word, the Greek root nymph, which is a bride. But again, there's these various wordplays between nymph, a bride, nubes, which is a cloud, nubia, which is to marry, which is referring to, in the Roman mysteries, to the nubagina, those who are born of a cloud. Those who are born of a cloud is representation of the Ruach Elohim, the high spirits. Again, there are correspondences between Awa, which is a jinn, and Awa, which is the air. So these all go back to the traditions of the jinn, the traditions of the dragon. So
this was fascinating. This really was. Thank you for coming on. Your website is, well, the books are Murder of Reality and Holographic Culture.
Yeah.
Your website is pierresabakbooks.com.
That's excellent, yeah. In terms of books, sometimes I get asked, sometimes people say, which book should I buy first? Because, you know, sometimes people like to dip into a subject. I would, if you've got, you know, obviously if you've got the resources, then buy both books. But I would definitely recommend, and again, if you're going to buy both books, I recommend that you read my second book first, holographic culture. This is because it will give you the groundwork in order to understand the murder of reality better. And holographic culture really is a very close deconstruction of the scatological tradition, the study of angelic ships within the religious and the mythological tradition. And as I said before, this really hasn't been done before, so this is something that, unless you've heard me talking about this on YouTube, this is something a field that you won't have come across before. I know about this field because I've spent 15 years reading dictionaries and trying to really understand this, but it's taken me 15 years to piece this together. So I recommend holographic culture because that will give you a good outline of the angelic tradition. And in addition, holographic culture is an extra 100 pages as well, nearly. So it's nearly 600 pages. So it's quite a tome. But I think once you've read holographic culture, you're in a much better position, particularly if you are interested in classical symbolism, occult symbolism, which denotes the dragon, Dracos and I, Drake, which is to watch or to gleam, again referring to Erin, a watcher or a shining one, Awin, which is the serpent. If you're interested in those subject areas, it will give you a very, very good basis. And it will also give you a good basis of the religious tradition as well, because don't forget that the religious and the mythological tradition are closely entwined. They are interrelated. So,
and then lastly, your other book.
That I really want to build up the scatological field, and I want to talk about that more. So I want to, for example, I want to write, I'm writing a book about fairies at the moment, which goes back into the scatological symbols of fairies. The fairies themselves are identical with the symbols of angels, and I'm going to prove that. Again, there are references to grey entities, and so that's all going to be in the new book. It will be the most detailed book on occult symbolism relating to fairies, in the same way that holographic culture really is the most detailed book on occult symbolism appertaining both to ancient aliens. And okay, Professor Temple wrote a book called The Sirius Mystery, which is an excellent book on ancient aliens, but there hasn't been a really decent book on ancient aliens for 25 years since Professor Temple's book. Holographic culture is that first book, but importantly, what it shows is the scatological tradition. And my third book on the fairies will demonstrate that the fairy tradition also is part of the scatological tradition, in which there are these hidden motifs, this codified discourse, this private discourse by the disciperati, the deceivers. And so that's something which I'm working on at the moment. And I'm also working on and piecing together the symbolism and the mythology of the human races, which is going to be appearing in another work as well, in Angelic Invasion. But I'm still working on that, and I'm piecing that together. Again, aspects of that are found within the Murder of Reality, but it's a very brief summary, but the symbology is immensely complex. It goes into astrotheology, and so I've had to really spend a lot of time deconstructing that as well. So that's another work which I would like to bring out within the next couple of years, the fairy book and the Angelic Invasion.
So thank you for taking the time to speak to me.
Thank you very much for contacting me. It's wonderful to speak to you as well, because I think what's very interesting, speaking to different people, is that they always bring out a different side to the subject, a different nuance, a different facet. And so that's, for me, is always very fascinating, the questions which people ask and how that draws out and elicits different types of answers and a different type of understanding as well. So that's very useful for me as well. So thank you very much for taking the time, your time, to speak to me and to try and make a difference. I think these are very critical and important times, and we need to try and make a difference. I don't want to lecture the audience, but I do think that anybody who's in the alternative media, and besides anybody who's not in the alternative media, if you want to be the change, you've got to be the change, and you have to try and behave exemplary. And even if you can't behave exemplary, then you have to at least try and aspire to be a better version of yourself. And so I think, like yourself, like myself, we have to try and lead by example, and we have to try and be very thoroughly decent people. And we have to care, and we have to make the effort. So thank you for caring, and thank you for taking the time to speak to me.
Thank you. This was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, have a good day.
You have a nice day as well. Thank you again.